This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here for a new segment in our The Old Hand series with the venerable John Maxwell. How are you, John?
Very well, thank you.
Now, we're here to speak about your involvement in the Toronto restaurant scene since you arrived here back in the 70s. For those people who are unaware of your kind of rich history in the scene, would you mind explaining a little to us?
Yes, I came here in 1979 with the express intent of opening Joe Allen, a restaurant which I did on 86 John Street. We opened in February of 1980. I came to Toronto knowing exactly one person, and within 2 weeks had found and purchased a building which had been a printing press. It was in rather distressed condition, and I managed to sign on as the architect of the renovation Carlos Ott, who, having completed my project, went on to win the competition to design the new Opéra de la Bastille in France, beating out thousands of other candidates from around the world. And of course, the reason that he was victorious was because he had the experience on Joe Allen. So Joe Allen Restaurant was my first in Toronto. In 1985, I opened Orso at 106 John Street. In 1987, Allen's on Danforth Avenue. In 1989, Dora Keogh Irish Pub. In 1990, P.J. O'Brien. And from 1993 to 1995, I was the managing director of Winston's Restaurant and the Trillium at Ontario Place as well.
So you've been about.
I have seen the scene from all sides over quite a time.
Now, I know this is an enormous question, but what are the most significant changes that you have seen in the Toronto restaurant environment since you arrived here?
Well, I think the most important change I've lived through is the enormous increase in interest in food, in cooking, and in dining that's taken place over the period. And a vast expansion in the number of restaurants. Well, as I saw it upon my arrival, there were about 10 top restaurants which appealed to a very established clientele, and then a terrifically large number of very good independently owned restaurants, generally by relatively recent immigrants. And these presented the cuisine of the home country. And that doesn't simply mean Chinese, Italian, and Greek, but every nation under the sun seemed to have its restaurant or restaurants as well. That's where the action was, and I would argue that's where the action still is.
Where is Toronto at today? How do you feel about Toronto as a restaurant city today compared to when you arrived in 1979?
Well, I think it is a better known restaurant city because we now have international restaurants here. But it is pretty much the same in that there is a lively, very creative tier of independently owned ethnic restaurants and a top tier. And today, in the middle, there are hip restaurants which appeal to somewhat established younger people, and that was not here when I arrived. That vast group of restaurants is of the past 15 years, I would say, or even 10.
There are many people who bemoan the lack of quality service in the restaurants of Toronto. Would you say there was any truth behind these claims?
I would say that there was very good service to be found in Toronto. However, not with the depth that it is found in better established or longer established restaurant cities. In a top restaurant city, Paris, New York, Rome, you find informal bistro, local neighborhood places with superior, fantastically professional service. That isn't so much found here. The really polished service is only at the top. And for the rest, we rely on young people passing through the industry for some reason. Well, for a reason we know, that is, the cost of living is very high, and it is very difficult to make a living at a less than super expensive restaurant and live in this city.
Over your many years as a customer of restaurants, where have you experienced the best service, whether that be elsewhere in the world or here in Toronto?
Well, I think I've experienced the most polished service in Toronto at a few well-established restaurants with a mostly non-native service staff. And as far as the world goes, I don't think we're really there. I've probably received my favorite service in Paris.
How do you feel the future of the independent restaurant scene looks? Is it bleak or blissful?
It's dim. I would say that the independent restaurateur is a man or woman in flight with a horde of issues pursuing him or her. There are now chain restaurants which presume to be independent, which fool the clientele into thinking they're independent, who enjoy the advantages given by multiple unit buying and yet appeal to the public on the basis of some perceived independence. These are very much in the rear-view mirror of the independent restaurateur, as are the outright chains, which offer what is called casual dining. Of course, the fast food sector is still rather profitable and very numerous. The independent faces a great struggle, and rents need to be mentioned as well. They are putting the independent on his or her back feet also.
Now, you have basically lived through both the rise and the fall of the restaurant critic. What are your feelings about the restaurant critic in today's restaurant world?
Well, my feeling is that the restaurant critic should try and attempt to understand what the restaurant in question is doing and judge its success on whether or not it succeeds in fulfilling that which it sets out to do. That is what I think the focus of restaurant criticism should be. One can't compare each and every restaurant to an ideal or to the highest exemplar of standards in the field. Each restaurant exists as a unique enterprise, one hopes, expressing the values of those who own it and work in it, and should be judged on whether or not it achieves its aims.
Over your years in the business, you must have seen many a trend come and go. Are there any that stick out memorably, or do you have any criticism, or whether positive or negative, on any of the trends that we see in the city today?
Well, trends, I think, by their very nature are ephemeral and mostly silly. So I won't criticize or compliment any trends, but I will certainly say we have seen them in the food service business to a very great degree, almost as great as in the fashion industry, and I do think that the restaurant industry and the fashion industry share a great many similarities. Just think of the movement towards nouvelle cuisine and beautifully laid out plates of very, very small amounts of food, which led then to larger plates of artfully stacked food, food which had to be deconstructed before it could be eaten.
The vertical
and of course
plating.
I did not know what the verb deconstruct meant before I was presented with high cuisine for the very first time. Deconstruct plainly means rendering in a fashion that may be made use of. The trend today is towards perhaps comfort food with a lot of ethnic appropriation, so that there is no ethnic identity at all left.
A prickly question, and one that many find it tricky to answer. Where do you stand on the whole tips or no tips part of the equation?
I'm in favor of tips. I think that a service staff should be compensated for its professionalism, but I do not think that the customer is to be priced out of the dining experience by a movement towards increased pay to the serving staff. I think that if the serving staff is to be salaried at a truly fair level, the price of restaurant meals is going to go up by no less than 35%, and therefore there will be far fewer restaurant meals consumed, far fewer serving staff hired, and far fewer restaurants.
My last question for you, John, is you have always been one of the greatest champions of Canadian wine, notably Ontario. What kind of change have you seen in the customer's appreciation of Canadian wine since you first started in the business?
Well, I think there is an enormously increased appreciation of all that is local in the taste businesses, food and drink, and not just wine, but spirits, fortified wines, aromatics, all very good. The consumer is now attuned to his or her being offered these products and appreciates them in a different way than he or she did shortly ago. I'm very happy about the direction we've moved in, and I feel there's going to be continued strength in the locally produced wine category. As we know, LCBO sales are really up in Ontario or Canadian wine. By that I mean wine made from locally grown grapes. I do not mean cellared in Canada, which is a scam. I see nothing but improvement in that area.
Can you remember first trying to sell people on Ontario wine back in the day?
I do indeed. At Allen's, we had a strong VQA component since our opening in 1987, but it was not until the year 2000 that we became 100% VQA on Allen's wine list, which now is a wine list of about 280 bottles. In the early days, people were resistant, and gleefully so. They would say with great delight that they were sufficiently sophisticated to recognize that Ontario or local wine was no good. All of it, particularly red, they would always say. And of course, their sophistication was but a transparent robe which cloaked their ignorance. I think the wines have been terrific at the top for quite a time, and I think quality is now spreading right throughout the range, and there are delightful competitive wines in very popular price categories.
John Maxwell, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. It's been 3 years in the making, this interview.
It has been a while. I am so shy and reticent, Jamie, that it took all your persuasive skills to get me before the camera.
Very much appreciate your time. Thank you again, John.
Thank you very much.
Bye for now.
Bye.